Welcome to Cove, Wellbeing and the My Trauma, Your Trauma series with me, Owen Morgan. I want to share my trauma journey and that of others. We will also look at the world of trauma healing, support and research, including guests who specialise in helping those overcome their trauma. My Trauma, Your Trauma is here to explore human experience. Welcome to Trauma Chat, where we invite on guests to talk all things trauma. Please watch and listen with care. Some of this content may be triggering or may make you feel uncomfortable. So do press that stop button and take a break. Always put yourself first. I'm a mental health advocate. I have interviewed hundreds of wellness experts over the years and also spent time with people who have stories of overcoming their wellness struggles. I myself have suffered with childhood abuse from childminders, severe school bullying, a deep depression in my 20s, and blackout anxiety. I also had a life-threatening illness in my early 30s, which changed my life forever. I want to give those a voice out there so they can inspire others to improve wellness. Right, I'm really excited. We're halfway through series 2. I had an awesome referral from one of my guests, Kimberly, and she said, you've got to get Dawn on. So I'm here today with Dawn Thomson, who is an energy psychologist and relationships coach. She helps people improve their relationships with themselves and their relationships with other people. She also works with men and women who want to live a life of personal power, free from shame, guilt, fear, and judgment. Dawn shows people struggling with self-doubt, anxiety, and feelings of not being good enough, and how to remove these blocks and live a life of freedom, purpose, and happiness. She is an emotional freedom technique master, a Neuro-Linguistics programming practitioner, and a HypnoBirthing Childbirth Educator. Breathe. How are you doing? Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Owen. I am absolutely wonderful and super excited to be talking to you today.
Yeah, I want to thank you. Thank you, Kimberly, if she's listening, for connecting us up. As soon as I saw what you did, I was like, right, because we haven't covered much from the kind of love relationships perspective yet. So I'm super duper excited to talk to you about all of this. So thank you for that. So how was this has been recorded in the time of the epidemic, and I think I've lost track. 13 weeks maybe over here in the UK.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
how has it been for you personally and professionally?
It's been. We keep using the word unprecedented, but it really has been unprecedented. And, I found that I'm probably in the minority here, but I've actually quite enjoyed it. And I've enjoyed the slowdown, and I've almost enjoyed the earth kind of going, thank God you're not pushing me too hard. And, being in my garden and hearing all the different kinds of birdsong without the busy road, which is a couple of, 500, 600 yards away from us. That silence has just been absolutely wonderful. I think it's really helped that, I like my husband, he likes me back, and we all, and our children, are pretty much on the Jane Austen scale of behaviour. So, I feel very fortunate that we've got that going on, because 13 weeks of being locked down with somebody who you don't like so much, or who could be slightly abusive or even just unhelpful or irritating, must be a real challenge for people. So I do consider myself very lucky. Funnily enough, and I don't know if you've seen this with your friends or in your own life, but just the last week, 12 weeks was kind of okay, but the 13th week got quite sticky. And, my youngest, who's 10, started exhibiting behaviours that weren't particularly helpful. And I started to feel a little bit down and a bit stuck in my own head. And so, yeah, it's interesting now, because we have now another 6-7 weeks of summer holidays with the lockdown lifting, how it will be. So I'm in a position of observing myself a bit and just seeing how it goes from here, But I've really welcomed it, actually, and I've loved the chance to just do less and give myself time to get off the hamster wheel. It's been difficult for some of my clients, so my work-wise, it's gone down maybe 60% because people can't get into the therapy room and they don't want to talk from home. That's fine. But equally, I've had a couple of returning clients who are, coming in needing to discuss lockdown and what's going on for them. So, it's been interesting.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can kind of tap into, can't they? The bits of it, they can reflect back on this when it's all over and reflect on the bits that were really good and the bits that obviously were really tough. There's been so much loss and so many people lost their jobs and, everybody's got different stories. And, even me, it was a complete disaster as a massage therapist, this, which is why I'm moving away from it now. Not because I necessarily have to necessarily, but it's because I realized that I need to be more stable for when these crazy things happen. So, it's going to end up being a good thing for me in the end. So, it
Yeah,
happens.
yeah.
But,
Hmm.
like you said, it's going to be interesting because of the homeschooling. But I think that the 13th week thing you're talking about, maybe it's a little bit because they're starting to ease up a little bit. And I think people are like getting a little taste of what the old life. And it's probably frustrating because you get a little bit, but not enough. It's like you can see the fairground and it's spinning around, but you can't jump on. So I guess
Yeah.
maybe it's that. Maybe is the
I think
problem.
it is possibly that. Also, Owen, I think it might be that a lot of people I've been speaking to don't really want the old normal back. And so, it's made them realize that actually they found the old normal fairly toxic. And now that it's kind of coming back, I think it's giving a lot of my clients and friends a lot of anxiety because it's almost been long enough for us to get a taste of what could be, but not long enough for that to actually embed and become a kind of culture. And so I do see a lot of people who are actually now scared to go out, not because of maybe contracting something, but not wanting to engage in what they'd left.
Yeah, I think that's another fantastic point. I think we can see our patterns and things that are going on for us, can't we? When we step out and look in, this is giving us an opportunity to be observant of our own behaviors and our bodily states and stuff. Anyway, we've already gone completely off topic today on our interview. We said this would happen, so it has. So,
Not like me at all.
no,
Sorry.
that's right. That was great. It gives a nice sense of who we both are. So let's swing back around to our question. So before we sort of tuck into sort of the trauma chat that we're going to be getting on with, I know I've done a big intro for you, but just a little bit more about yourself up to this point. So how long have you been doing it for, and kind of what training did you start with? I always find that interesting.
Oh, well, I've been doing this for 13 years now. And I started off with NLP actually, because, I have been through quite traumatic periods in my life and have undergone lots of different kinds of counseling. And I found a lot of them didn't give me tools to make myself better. I felt they kind of kept me in state and in the stuck place that I didn't want to remain in. So NLP kind of really gave me a toolbox to work on myself and then to work with other people. And then from there, the energy psychology and the emotional freedom technique and the hypnotic stuff came in that way. So yeah, I used to be a graphic designer before I did this job. So this is almost to me like graphic design for your mind, as opposed to, you take the client's brief and you help them communicate in a different way, in a more helpful way. So yeah, that's how I started.
That's amazing. I think, we have certain ways that our brain kind of ticks along, and, you maybe we're a more structured person, or maybe we're more, fancy free or whatever. But I think all of those can be really impactful in a therapy based environment. So that structure allows you to study in things that have structure in them. So that's no bad thing, eh? It really links in, which is great. Okay, brilliant. Okay, so we're going to be talking today a little bit about sort of relationships and how trauma affects that and all this kind of stuff, attachment, all kinds of things are going to go down. I ask every single person the same question, so you're going to get it too. So for you, what is your definition of trauma?
Okay, so my definition of trauma is like it's a short circuit, actually, in your energetic system, which I think is made of, your emotional, physical, and mental / cognitive side. So the way that I see trauma is that it's like something happens or a number of things happen that create a kind of short circuit in the way that your system works. Um, Now, that could be an event or a number of different events, or it can actually be an absence of something as well, which is something that I'm very interested in. But it creates a kind of seizure and then a fragmented part of your psyche. And then you will then, as your body is, and your mind, body, spirit is trying to work as one system, it's working from a fragmented place rather than a whole place.
That's such a lovely way to describe it. Honestly, I've heard whatever, how many is it now? Like 25 versions of this question. And that's, I really love the way you've, yeah, described that. That's, I haven't heard that before. So thank you for that, for our audience. But that I can see how that ties into your work now. It kind of all flows. I can see exactly why you do what you do and the way you do it. So thank you. So I always ask people just to have like a little, sort of a little bit look at what you've been through that sort of, you know, informs your work. So have you had struggles yourself with mental and emotional well-being?
Absolutely. And I think that that's why I've become the therapist that I am, almost in that physician heal thyself kind of way. So I'm a Black woman who was born to parents of Barbadian heritage. So straight away, I was born carrying the DNA of generations of trauma, in a sense, which hasn't really been spoken about much. In the last 10, 15 years, we're talking about that more, but that's almost like my baseline, essentially. But then I was born into a family that was very emotionally neglectful. So we had no financial stability and no emotional stability. Um, we weren't, our feelings weren't considered, or they were downplayed, or they were almost invalidated as children. Um, and that was really deeply traumatic. And this is where, the absence of something can be traumatic, as an adult, as I understand it now, because it was an exceptionally emotionally neglectful childhood for me. And then when I was 11, my dad was diagnosed with a brain tumor, but it was never talked about because it was just a problem that we needed to get through. It was a benign brain tumor, but it was in the wrong part of his brain, which meant that he went through. To remove it would have killed him outright. So what they did was they gave him two prognoses, which I found out later, one of 4 years, one of 11 years. He lived 11 years, but he then had four very invasive brain surgeries, which meant as a teen, I was almost living through the valley of the shadow of death without either of my parents talking about it and just get on with your grades. So I was dealing with being a clever Black child, bullied by all the other Black kids in my year for being a bounty, for being white inside and Black outside because I was too clever, too cultured, whatever it was. Plus, my father was dying. We all knew something was up, but my mum was like, "Oh, just get on with it." So it was a very strange environment in which to grow up, particularly when I was, in your teenage years, you're trying to find yourself, work out who you are. And then I eventually got married, had my first child, and I think had undiagnosed PND, which wasn't diagnosed until my second child 4 years later. And by that time I was 41 and I was really angry and cross. And all the stuff about my childhood came up because I think parenthood has that strange kind of Janus-like way of being, doesn't it? Because you're worried about what kind of mother you're going to be or how you're going to parent. And you look back to how you were parented. And if that was neglectful, it puts you in a really stuck and scary place. So I had a couple of years of counselling for that as well.
Wow, and your story is a prime example of all of the different parts of the grown-up experience, and they talk about big T trauma, small T trauma, and then you also have the more, what you're, like you said, the stuff that you're not getting, and it's come up in the last few episodes about the trauma of not being seen, heard, understood, and held. that's very traumatic, but it's not obvious to see. It's not like you're being abused or hit. It's the complete it's just a complete kind of abandonment, really. And that, is a human nature need. It's very traumatic. And it sounds like you had kind of these little traumas all in and around that. And obviously trying to find a place of safety too. It's, if you don't feel safe at school, you don't feel safe at home because no one's talking about anything, even though it's really bad. You've got no place there to feel seen, heard, understood, and safe, which for any development is going to be a huge issue. And obviously there was so much packed in there, obviously, and like you said, we're in the time of the Black Lives Matter movement at the moment. So we're in this mode of
Yeah.
having and very rightly to be having these kind of conversations, like you've been talking about. So thank you
Yeah.
for sharing that too. So you went through all of these things and you came out and you had your counseling. So how did you find the counseling yourself? And was there a gap between your counseling and becoming, a wellness worker?
Actually, funnily enough, no, because what happened was that I had, so by the time I'd had my counselling, which was psychodynamic counselling for my postnatal depression, I had actually been working as a therapist for 3 years at that point. So it was really, and of course, then you're carrying the whole, you're making other people feel better. Why can't you make yourself feel better? You're with that, and all that stuff that the self talk that you give yourself. Um, and yeah, so I had actually moved into working with people and thankfully not getting triggered, which was really interesting actually. It was only really when I became a mum for the second time that I think my system went, this is enough, this needs to be looked at.
Yeah, it's interesting you say about the triggers because people think, oh wow, you can't do therapy work if you haven't dealt with all your stuff. But unfortunately, with most people, when you say dealt with all your stuff, it doesn't really mean anything because sometimes you don't even know you have stuff until you have a trigger. So unless you're going to sit around healing for like 25 years going, am I ready now? Then you go into therapy and then you get
Yeah.
triggered. So there has to be a level of knowing, can you hold a space for somebody? Can you support people? If you can, beautiful. What's nothing wrong with that while you carry on with your journey too? And like you said, we're triggered by certain things. And, a lot of the stuff in my life was triggered by more personal stuff. I was always high functioning at work. I was always very good at work, even though I had a lot of depression, anxiety. I was very high functioning in the workplace. So you wouldn't know. It was the personal stuff that triggered me. So, it's a prime example right there. It doesn't need to hold us back just because we have stuff going on, which is really in there. So did you, because obviously I know you started with NLP. So why did you pick NLP then as your first?
I think because it really resonated with my sense of order. I need to have like method and order. And, I'd always been like the kind of agony aunt to my friends and family growing up, but that felt quite loose and quite, almost too sprawling. Whereas actually NLP, because it had these kinds of, presuppositions and ways of working, it really chimed with the designer in my mind that could not so much compartmentalize it or make it systematic. Yeah, it made it systematic in a way that wasn't regimented. And so I really liked that. And the fact that it was experiential as well. So as you're training, you're being worked on, you can really see how it's affecting you, but how good you feel. So, I became a really very evangelical, boring dinner guest for a couple of years when I was like, oh yeah, and all I did was talk about it. But yeah, it was a good grounding for me because it was solutions focused. I'd gone through a lot of counselling, particularly my bereavement counselling with my dad, where I would talk and talk, cry and cry. Somebody would tilt their head and then they'd say, time's up. And I'd be like, how has that helped me? You've given me, all I've done is talk about this. So I think that's where having a kind of focus or a method to pin things on, I found very helpful.
Yeah, thank you. I had a lot of NLP in my life, but it's like you said, you kind of, so much of the healing journey is co-regulation based. through therapy's relationship was brilliant, but also self-regulation is a huge part of that journey. We need to have daily practices and take a little bit of responsibility for our journey too. You can't just expect somebody else. They're not there to fix you. They're there to guide you back to where you are, who you are. Going through all of
Yeah.
getting rid of,
Yeah.
not get rid of it, but working through that stuff so you can become who you are once again. So people get really hung up, don't they, about the
Mm.
fixing thing. And we've said time and time again on this show,
Yes.
it's that's not what it's about, which is in there. So I'm really interested to see, actually, now as we talk into the subject at hand, how you intertwine all your amazing therapy modalities that you have. So we'll talk about relationships today. I'm super duper excited about this. I've been doing a lot of polyvagal theory research for the last year and learning all about co-regulation, neuroception, all this kind of stuff, and how our nervous systems can dance together a little bit along the way before your thoughts even kick in. So it can be really, really useful. So, how do you feel our relationships are affected by trauma? This is a huge question, so we'll try our best with it. But like, what are the main things to think about when it comes to our adult relationships linked to trauma? How do we sometimes see that play out?
Oh, Owen, we can see it play out in a number of ways. So, quite a lot of the time, we can. It really is all about, well, first of all, how the kind of partners that you pick. So, deeply traumatized people, because we're working from this fragmented space, will quite often pick partners that reinforce that trauma because vibrationally that's what they're resonating at. So, somebody who has swept their emotions and needs under the carpet will quite often pick a narcissistic person or someone who just, the taker of all the emotional needs because they have never learned how to develop their own needs. Or they'll pick somebody to almost save them or to be everything to them that they haven't given themselves or have found in themselves through their lives. Or it can be seen as commitment phobia, can be seen as people who have lots of one-night stands or, very short-lived, but move on very quickly. It really depends on how your trauma has manifested itself and what you believe about your trauma. Then that will play out in your real life and the way that you engage and the way that you pick your partners.
Thank you. I mean, my brain was just whirling around then with loads of examples of stuff, and how we I thank you that we started with that, because how we pick, like you said, is we may not see what we're doing until someone spots it. Years down the line, the kind of men that women tend to pick or whatever. But I find sometimes, for people that have told me their stories, is that they try to complete what they didn't get. So if they had attachment issues and they weren't shown love, they either thought they were unlovable, so they have very toxic relationships where they're just treated like crap because they don't
Yep.
believe they're lovable,
Yeah.
or they're so desperate to complete what they didn't get, they try and find really smothering characters, which in the end just end up, giving that person a lot of mental health problems. So it can go, it's not as simple as it is that trauma, that choice.
No, it really isn't. And there's something in relationships called the pursuer withdrawer dynamic. And we'll everyone will have seen this in action or been there themselves, where the somebody will go after somebody, and even within an established relationship, be pursuing and tell me this, give me this, I need this, and then the other person will tend to withdraw and not give. And the pursuer will see that as withholding and get very upset, and the withdrawal person will find it smothering and be very upset. But both of these dynamics, both of the players in this, can be traumatized and will feel, in a lot of ways, inadequate. So if you have been brought up believing that you're not good enough, that you're not worth anything, you'll tend to fall into a pursuer, largely a kind of pursuing role, where you need someone to prove to you constantly, particularly if you haven't done the work on yourself to say, no, I am worthy and I am lovable. You'll be looking for that externally, which can be smothering to the other person in the relationship. Equally, you could be somebody who doesn't feel lovable or feels inadequate and will be the withdrawer, because then you'll be scared that you might rock the boat, that you aren't the person that this person wants you to be, and you think it would be safer to do nothing than to act, you know. So, yeah, there's so many things at play here, in terms of your particular relationship style and what you expect from a relationship.
Yeah, because I think, in a way, for example, I'm trying to think of like friends over the years as examples, but kind of where, well, one prime example, I know a lot of ladies in my life who didn't have they had a few direct traumas personally, but they had a lot of trauma around them. So as they grew up, there was a lot of people suffering, parents with mental health issues, and they became very early on kind of carers for those people. But what tends to play out is they kind of keep that kind of concept going. So they pick men or women that they feel like they need to save or to
Absolutely.
care for or whatever. And it's coming from a place of, a lot of them say, well, they lost that person or their partner or their parent died and they felt like they didn't save them like they were supposed to. So they will go out there and find people who are on the edge that they can try and save to complete that story. And it just ruins their lives because they're never in loving, safe relationships.
No, it's they're wanting to rewrite and make right their past. And until they are aware that that's what they're trying to do, then they are working from the unconscious place, which is 95% of the way your mind works. And it's habituated. And so if you are of that belief that that is what you're meant to do, you will keep on doing it until you are able, with a therapist, to allow you to see the pattern, you know. And I know lots of men who, they come to me quite often when they're typically shut down and they really want to connect with their partners, but they can't. So, they can't say, I love you. I had a client who would just fudge it, and she'd say, you never say the words I love you, and he'd be like, oh, and he'd almost be like that because he couldn't bring it out because it was too unsafe for him to do, to let that part of him go. It was too scary. So I have a lot of men come to me to help them feel the big emotions and feel safe to feel those big emotions. And when you've come from a place of trauma, it feels deeply unsafe to 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 express yourself in that way, or even sometimes to feel it.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned safety because it comes up time and time and again in our shows, because a big part of trauma is, not being able to deal with it, something that happened to you, then becoming unsafe. I think if you feel very unsafe in your body and you can't sense into these things, the likelihood of you feeling safe with somebody else is it's not looking good, is it? Because you don't know the concept of safety within anyway. So to expect someone to provide you with safety, I find, especially when I was in my 20s with my relationships, I needed them to do certain things, say certain things, reply within a certain amount of time. Otherwise, I thought there was something desperately wrong, and it's exhausting. It's gone now. All of that, it's not in my life now, but it's bloody
Good.
exhausting.
Yeah.
Living on those kind of conditional things outside of you, because I just did not feel safe inside at all. And I thought someone else could do that for me, basically. So, it's tricky, isn't it?
And that's the main thing with traumatized relationships, or where you haven't realized that you can be your own caregiver and keep yourself safe, hold space for yourself. Then we will always look for external validation. And whether that's, basking in someone's perceived reflected glory, or whether that's, as you say, if they haven't called back in half an hour, what does that mean? It's we're divesting too much of our own emotional power that way. And and then that can almost create more trauma, because you're kind of almost re-traumatizing yourself a little bit, because you're perceiving things through a kind of hazy window based on your trauma, so you're not actually really seeing the truth of a situation. You know, and that's why trauma affects all our relationships.
Yeah, yeah, no, spot on. It made me think about communication too, and how important, I'm very good at communicating. If I get triggered by something, I'm talking about, work, life, whatever. If I get triggered by something, I've done so much work on myself. Like, oh, that's interesting. I was triggered by that. I wonder why that is. So I've got this language to reflect, so it doesn't ever hook me up. Even if I really get triggered and say something silly, I can say sorry. I can say to them, "Oh, I don't know why I was so triggered by that. I'm definitely going to have a look into that." So I'm taking ownership of my triggers, which I think it changed my life ever on, to be honest, once I started doing that. It was amazing. So from a kind of the perspective of people that are in relationships, how, because obviously you work with a lot of couples and individually, how can we start to navigate these relationships if we know we've got trauma and we know it's going to be a bit of a journey for us? Is it as simple as, if I'm with somebody that I feel is very triggering for me and it's clearly not a healthy relationship, just call it a day? But sometimes I find that there's a lot of joy too in a lot of relationships that I hear about, and it would be a real shame to lose that. And deep down, they've got a deep connection. It's just layered with this stuff which can be worked on. So do you think it's not as simple as just leaving it and finding someone else with the same trauma so you can have a trauma bond? Or is it very much about going on a healing journey? And if that person deep down in your core means the world to you, then go and get some therapeutic support or whatever you need so you can start to navigate through it and come out the other side. You think that is an option too?
I think it's almost the best option. So in my work, I'll quite often, particularly with couples work, we'll do sessions with each member of the couple separately, because quite often they're bringing, I try and get them to see that their relationship, it's a bit like a limited company where they're both directors of the company and they're putting things into the relationship. So it doesn't, something you said just before you asked that question that I wanted to pick up on was that you were really good at saying, oh gosh, I was triggered by that. I wonder why. You didn't make it, you made it a behavioral thing as opposed to an identity thing. You didn't go, oh, I'm such a X or a Y, or I'm so, you know what I mean? You didn't make it an I am statement, which is where a lot of trauma is grounded in that I am not good enough, I am unlovable, I am broken. By taking it into the behavior, it makes it almost safer and easier to look at and slightly brings a level of dispassionate thought towards it rather than making it something that's so deeply personal, which can make someone very defensive or attacking. So by putting making my clients see that their relationship, they feed into it, but it's not them themselves. Their relationship, the relationship is the client, not necessarily them on a personal level, but their behaviors and their beliefs feed into this third entity, is an interesting way of doing it, because it means that each member of the relationship can do a little bit of work on themselves and then can have some awareness of what they're bringing to the party or not, and see how they affect it.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up because it's come up time and time on the show, and I have to say, every person I interview is teaching me a little bit more about what it is to be human. So that really plays in a part. But that kind of, I try not to make things be about who I am, more about, anger just came up for me there, and keeping it as that, being a compassionate observer of my own experience rather than getting into this. God, I've just always been someone, I've just got a bad temper. It's who I am. It makes me so sad when people say things like that, because I think most of us, I like to think, are inherently good. It's just we've been worn down to a point where we start to believe in all of our behaviors rather than seeing them as behaviors in our history. And I've always tried to use that language on the show and hope I've never slipped up on it. But, I'm really interested in the relationship side of it, because I know couples who have had loads of trauma, but there's something about them together with the wider spectrum of their teamwork, which it never seems to affect their relationship. They may have problems with work or whatever, but their relationship stays strong. So it's interesting that it doesn't always play out in the way we think. Two traumatized people can't cohabitate, because that's not true either.
No.
I find when people talk about trauma
Not
bonds,
at
people
all.
might think that sounds like a bad thing, but I know loads of people with trauma bonds, and it's allowed them to heal together because they were able to use that like-minded bond of pain to come out the other side.
And I think the couples who can do that are the ones that own it. And even if they don't understand it, they're able to bring it bring it into the light for sharing with that other partner. So, with my partner, um, I've clearly gone through this is what I've been through, this is what I suffer from. These are things I've released. These things might come back up, or these are the stories I've made up about myself along the way. So quite often, if I am triggered by something or something, he said something that he felt was perfectly innocent, and I've reacted. I've been able to say, well, actually, the story I've been telling myself, a bit Brené Brown, the story I've been telling myself about this, or where it took me to straight away was this, but I understand. Do you know what I mean? And it's almost like if both people are able to kind of own and allow the other partner to know where the trauma might have come from, that they're working on it, then, it can be a learning experience and it can be a really enriching experience. Nobody's perfect. Perfection's kind of like sterile. Don't want that. You want to have something. It's like people who say the little grit in the oysters, the bit that makes the pearl of a relationship. It kind of is. And if you are able to understand as much as you can and make space for that in a loving way, then actually it is the thing that really keeps you together. I think it's when people who are traumatized don't understand the trauma and act from that place, from an unconscious place. That's where it becomes difficult.
Yeah, definitely. And it's kind of like having that level of awareness, both of what's going on for you, awareness of what's happening in a relationship, awareness of what's going on for them. I mean, all of this is coming down to communication again. But we did a whole episode on love. Me, Steve, and Daryl on our other show. And we talked about love languages and all kinds of stuff. And once I found out about the love languages, just as a nice cheesy way of thinking about how we relate, it really allowed me to like let people know, and it really helped their relationships because they were like, oh God, I didn't realize that like their love language is more acts of it's more acts
Acts
of
of
service
service.
than you being all over them and trying to have sex with them all the time. They need their space.
Yeah,
What they really want you to do is
yeah.
even like pick them up from work and say, yeah, I'll come and get you, or like cooking a meal. Once you understand each other's love languages, your relationship can completely transform, and you can support each other. Oh, babe, have I been, saying I love you enough? Even if it doesn't necessarily feel 100% comfortable for you, it's something that can really, I think, allow relationships to really flourish.
And it makes it not about Sally or John. It's how Sally expresses herself. It comes back down to the behavioural level rather than Sally, you're a cold, unfeeling woman because you didn't give me any physical touch, or John doesn't care about me and won't be there to support me because he hasn't done the dishes. We're talking about it. It kind of almost takes the charge away from it being a personal thing and more about what you do and how you do it, not about you necessarily. And I think that's what happens when people throw the towel in. They're coming from a traumatized place. They pick somebody who they think is going to make that feel better, blank it out, save them in some way, or whatever. And when that person doesn't, they go, that person's just not for me. Whereas they're not giving them a chance to say, well, let's talk about the behaviors, your expectations. I think I read somewhere that they said 95% of marriages and relationships fail because of unmet expectations. And, you know, these expectations might not even be yours. They might be coming from a societal construct, or they could be coming from anywhere that you've picked up to say, he loves me because he's done the dishes, if you're an acts of service person. But if you're a physical touch person, well, he always washes the dishes, but he doesn't touch me, doesn't love me. And that's not the case. He might love you as much as he can with everything that he has, but he doesn't understand that. We don't talk about these sort of things very much.
Yeah, it kind of, and then we like you touched on it there. You start to create stories, don't you? Because you're not having that open flow conversation. You're not self-reflecting, so you just create stories like, "Oh my God, they're so ungrateful. How can I be with somebody that's so ungrateful as a human being?" And suddenly it's turned into this massive. Well, hang on a minute.
Yeah,
Let's just calm down a second because it's that level of, it's such simple awareness too. Love languages is such a simple awareness tool to
it's
understand.
so fantastic.
Um,
So fantastic. One of my friends has a husband who worked away from home, and she was a physical touch and he was an acts of service. He came home one and she was at the door, all like, "Hi." He gave her a little dry kiss on the cheek, went straight out and started mowing the lawn. She was furious, furious. And it's that very thing. He was doing, "I love you, I'm going to mow the lawn." And she was like, "He's just given me one kiss. That means he can't love me." So it's knowing that and understanding that. And I just wish that everybody, I do use that as a tool in my work actually. And it's interesting, people, sometimes it's not what they think their primary love language, or, or there's a mixture where they think, and they don't think about acts of service as being a loving thing, or because we're brought into the whole, it's got to be physical, and then there's got to be the words he says, but quality time and gift giving and for some people more important. But we're quite narrow in the way that we talk about love in the West, I think.
Yeah, totally. And you mentioned needs met too. A lot of what we're talking about today is, we have needs that we need to get, we feel that we need to have met. There's ways that we meet other people's needs that may be enforced by our own belief systems. And the needs met thing obviously ties in massively to our childhoods, of course, doesn't it? Which is actually our next question, which is, how do our childhood attachments and wounds play out in adults? And I know we've kind of covered bits of this already, but I find the needs met thing is so massively so massively important, so much powerful, and it does tie in obviously to love languages. But what are your thoughts on on children who really aren't seen and heard by their parents, especially really young, and they don't ever form a safe co-regulating attachment? I mean, that must be, are you seeing that as being a real issue with adults that you work with when you find out that may be a source?
Yes. And you know, because from the ages of 0 to 7, you're an absolute blank canvas, as you probably know, Owen. So everything that happens and that you perceive and experience from the ages of 0 to 7 becomes your new normal. It's your normal. It's an imprint. So, and that's why people who are traumatized sometimes don't see it as trauma, because they've been born into it, and that's just what they see as normal. And then from 7 to 14, they then start to reason a little bit and try and shake out of it. But it can be very difficult for people who have had an imprint at birth, 0 to 7, to get out of that, because it's completely unconscious. And they don't know that it's not normal. They might see that they are forming attachments and these attachments aren't working, but it's like trying to build a house on really poor foundations. They just don't understand why it's happening. So actually, it's it's pretty much what I will start with my in therapeutic work. It's not so much like, a lot of people go, all therapy is about, tell me about your mum, tell me about your dad, blah blah. But actually, it is. It creates an imprint that you, and then you take it and almost sleepwalk through your life, knowing that there can be something different, knowing that there can be something more, but until that's released, looked at, and rebuilt, it's very hard. It's near impossible to get out from under it. So what happens in your childhood energetically is huge, as well as from a cognitive belief forming.
Yeah, it certainly does. I spend a lot of time, I'm at that age, mid 30s. A lot of my friends are having kids, stepsons come to my life. So I've been able to see, what's going on and really observe it. With all this wellness stuff that I've learned over the years doing this, I'm able to look on and find it very fascinating, interesting how children behave. But I've noticed, I saw an article today that I'll quickly mention, but before that, just talking about abandonment, and how abandonment doesn't mean that your father left you when you were 4 and left. Sometimes you can be abandoned with them still there,
Absolutely,
and
yeah.
in with it, which in some way can be worse because they're present but totally not present. So you're constantly trying to get them to see you. So which is a hell of a different storyline for a kid to be going in. And the abandonment thing I find really interesting because there's an article yesterday. I was going to send it to you on Instagram, I forgot, which was there was this awesome article about how we keep banging on about screen time for kids and how, oh God, get your kids off screen time. And there's this whole article about parents. How about you get off your screens as well? Because if you're playing with your child and you're getting a bit bored because you're a bit played out, you get your phone out, you do a bit of scanning, the kid's still playing, the kid looks up, you're there, but you're not there. If you keep doing that over and over again, even though it sounds really stupid, it's just a phone, you are abandoning them in that moment. Their need is for you to see them, hear them, hold them, play with them. And you're bored, so you're scanning. And it's just a prime example, isn't it, of how you can feel abandoned in a room full of people.
Correct. And then if you are not taught that you're important and that you're seen, you essentially almost abandon yourself. Well, you're not taught to embrace yourself. So, you perpetuate that sense of abandonment in your relationships. And that article sounds brilliant. I mean, my daughter, my youngest one, when she was about 3, it was summer holidays. And she did say, "Shall we play?" And I said, "Yeah." And then she said, "Okay, put your phone down." And I put my phone down. And then she went, "Over there." And she pointed to the furthest point of the.
Brilliant.
And I was like, "Okay, I hear what you're saying." So, she was teaching me at that point as well, like, no, you don't get to do that. And in my own life, my parents were exactly that. Both of them were absent, but there. And a lot of my clients will say, "Oh, well, my parents were fine. They were always there. We wanted for nothing financially or practically, but in terms of the emotion, they were emotionally absent or expecting them, or they had narcissistic parents where everything they did reflected on the parent, or they were bound up in conditional love. If you do this, then you will get my love as well, which is a very difficult one for children and adults to navigate, because then they're brought up to believe that love is a contract. So there was a lovely article that I read a few years ago about, in the old days when people got married in churches, they talk about love being a covenant and not a contract. And it was so interesting to me, because a covenant is, I pick you above all else. I will love you because of you and despite you, but I will love you. And we've fallen into this contractual, if he does this for me, I'll do this for him. If she does this in a certain way, then I will love her. And there are a lot of children who are brought up with that conditional way of being, that believe that that's love. And that creates a lot of problems. And I see that a lot in the therapy room as well. A lot of conditional love as opposed to, I just love you for all of you. Because people don't know what all of them is because they didn't have a chance to develop it.
Yeah, the conditional thing, thank you for that, is we've got all the classic buzzwords here today, but the conditional side of it is so huge because, I was listening to Body Keeps a Score again the other day, and it's my favorite book ever. But I always remember the story of a girl that was, repeatedly, sexually assaulted and raped by her dad. But the issue is on some levels that the dad never saw her in any other way. He was never there for in any other way. He was totally abandonment. The only time he paid any attention was in that act. So she then grew up to think that the way I have to give sexual favors across to receive love. So she then had this just horrendous adulthood of being sexually abused and raped all the time and stuff. And she was so disassociated by it, but it was the only source of love she had. So she was dissociated, and it was the only thing she had that she could use, even though it was the one thing that was disassociating her in the first place. And that is like a whole other level of being stuck, isn't it? Just stuck in existence. And it's such a sad story, but it's an example of that, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's the parts work, isn't it? There's a part of her that knows that it's absolutely wrong and, not in terms of judgment, but it's wrong for her system. But then the other part of her is like, but that's the only thing I can get. So that part is trying to work from a place of positive intention, no matter how flawed it is. And yeah, that's an awful cycle in which to be.
Yeah, and it kind of turns into, I was thinking about resentment the other day. I was just going to throw this towards you because I hadn't really thought much about it, about, relationships that we have with parents. Like, why do I keep shouting at my parents? Why do they annoy me so much? When you're an adult, I'm talking about. It's like, is this just like, teenager stuff I never shook off? But then the more I thought about it, I thought, hang on, resentment will play a part. If you've got to a point where you're so aware as an adult, you look back and you go, oh God, I resent them for not show me that love, that sticks with you too, and that resentment creates more triggers, and you don't end up letting it go. And I thought, why has no one created resentment release therapy? That sounds like a cool new thing.
That is cool. I think I'm just going to nick that off you and just and trademark it now. So I need to go in about 10 minutes. But actually, that is what EFT does. So with all the energetically, resentment held in the body is deeply toxic. Any emotion like that is deeply toxic to the physical system. And through emotional freedom technique, we don't stop with the release until you move through the anger, the pain, the resentment, and get higher and higher up until you can actually see that in reality, your parents were only doing what they thought was right. Everybody's system is working perfectly according to their beliefs and their own experiences. They would have given you more if they'd had more. And so that the therapy doesn't end until you can reach that elevated place, see the whole dynamic playing out, forgive your parents, and forgive yourself.
Yeah, well, that's tapping into forgiveness, self-forgiveness too. It's in there, and I've time and time again, I hear people be really resentful of something their partner does, but never tells them, and then expects their partner to
Yeah.
know that that's an issue. So you end up never having the conversation. You resent them, and that becomes toxic over time. That makes no sense to me. How can they have a chance to repair it if they have no idea they're doing it?
Oh, this is this is a huge one. Yeah, I've talked about this quite a lot, and it's that mind reading thing that we've bought into as a culture, that if the person that really loves you will get you, and not only get you, but be able to mind read, and that makes it really easy for people who are unused to identifying their own needs and verbalizing it. So again, they're divesting that responsibility on the person to mind read and guess what they need. But also buying into that myth that you'll just be so well in tune that you just have to look at him and he'll say, oh, is that what you want? You'll be like, yes, because you're my partner. It's deeply damaging. And I talk about it, it's like the fine thing. It's like, so poor, and it usually works out as a male-female thing, that the male will say to the female, what's wrong? And she'll say, nothing. And he'll be like, okay, I've asked a couple of times. She's saying, I'm fine. I know clearly she's not fine, but I'll just drop it because I've asked. And she'll sit there thinking, why has he not? Why has he not? But then equally, she feels resentful about something he's done. But then underneath that is usually a sense of whether she feels that it's justifiable to feel resentful. And then there will be this tug of war between, am I right to think that? And should I be thinking that? But that's really annoyed me. He hasn't guessed what I need because I haven't told him. And it goes into a kind of spiral. And then I was reading an article a couple of years ago about the one thing that most men hate about their female partners is talking at midnight when they get into bed. And that is almost the denouement of the fine thing, where you've asked your partner at 7, what's up? She's sat there on this seething resentment, no, tried to talk herself out of it, not given herself time and space to really just say it, regardless. They get into bed, she can't cope with it anymore, and then she goes, do you know what? This is what I'm upset about. And he's like, I was about to go to sleep, I asked you about this at 7, and then they feel quite attacked. So, yeah, there's got to be, and it's about, again, holding space for yourself and that wounded part of yourself to say, what is it that you want? Because what I found is that, particularly in heterosexual relationships, the man only wants to supply something, the woman with something, but they won't do it if there's a slight risk that they might get it wrong. They'd rather do nothing than get it wrong. And the woman is standing there going, guess, guess, guess. I don't want to tell you. And that might be because she's not been taught, or it doesn't feel familiar and safe enough to verbalize her needs. So there needs to be work done there.
Yeah, it's interesting, really, because me and my partner, I'm not deliberately not talking much about my relationship for obvious reasons, but it's, for us, it's all about co-regulation. So we know that it's our duty to be able to self-regulate ourselves, take care of our nervous systems, create space for our mind to work for what it needs to do. We both meditate, which helps, but I think co-regulation is really important. It's understanding each other's triggers. It's understanding how you can help co-regulate each other, what each other need. Once you've had that conversation, you're done. Even if you have a trigger, you talk about it, it's dealt with. You have a rupture, there's a rupture with your co-regulation, you repair it. It's not a big issue. It doesn't have to become a big ongoing thing. And that changes everything, because it means even though you have elements of a bit of toxicity here and there, that's all good, because that will fade over time through that level of conversation. And we've got a few questions left. I think we're going to cover them all, but I think we figured that was going to happen. But I'll get you back on. It's fine, part two. But I just wanted to quickly ask you about, how we parent our children to prepare them for relationships later, because I think that's really important. But with our little one, I've told this story time and time again on this show. But we, from like 2.5, 3 years old, we started teaching him about self-awareness, about how are you feeling, where is it in your body, what color is it, what texture, all this kind of stuff. So we always ask him after a tantrum, how did it feel? What do you think was the reason? So we get him used to sort of thinking about the stories behind it. Whereas now, just gone 4, we don't even need to tell him this. He's already doing it. So he will come up to us and go, oh, Oe, he calls me Oe. So you say, Oe, I felt a bit sad then. I said, oh, okay, why? And then he'll say, oh, because you didn't tell me, you were going to the toilet. And then I turned around and you were gone. So we have given him language to tell us, I can now repair that rupture. I know not to go without telling him I'm going again. Problem solved. Not going to be an issue again, hopefully. He's going to become such a wise, adult from that. I think it's parents' responsibility to teach their kids emotional awareness and the language that they can use to express it too. But this is a whole other episode, childhood stuff. But that's just
it kind of is
a prime example of that. So, what are your thoughts on that? Kind of like encouraging our children to become self-aware nice and early.
I totally agree, because it goes back to the blueprint. So, your wee one is pretty much halfway through his imprint stage. And if this is his imprint, then he is going to be all right as an adult, because this is his normal. And this is where he will feel comfortable and familiar. And it's in, so you and your partner have done an amazing job with him. And yeah, I'm like, he's going to be totally fine. It's where people are working from a place where they don't have that sense of awareness that you and your partner have. That's where the problem comes. But I agree, with my daughters, I've always asked them to speak their truth, and to, however they're feeling is completely valid. It's always completely valid. And something else that I have done is, sometimes when we talk about how they're feeling, I'll quite often say, well, as your mum, it's my responsibility to make sure that I support you in that. And, so they don't feel that asking for support is weak, and they don't feel that adults know everything and that they know nothing. We've been really clear on the way they feel and the way they act is to own it and to understand it. And also that we're just souls on our learning journey as well, which is something I didn't get from my parents. They were both very traumatized individuals, and all I got was, don't contradict me, do as I say, do as I say. you don't, you know. So both my children are very much clear on how they feel about things and are open to talk about that, and they're dynamic, and they can see, they watch people as well, they watch the dynamics between other people. They're, you know, a good bit older than your stepson, but yes, it's really important.
Yeah, and like you know, going full circle to what you said at the beginning of the show, you know, these relationships do inform how we perceive relationships going forward. You know, time and time again, we hear, you know, women picking their dad, or, you know, men who are mama's boys picking very nurturing, caring women, all this kind of stuff. It does play out, it does play a part. But I think if, you know, if you can grow together, you know, being aware, grow together, you know, people grow and then they split up because, you know, one's grown quicker than the other. That's totally normal too. That's totally normal human experience, especially in your 20s. That's all natural. But what
It is.
what we'll do, I'll tell you what we'll do is we'll do another episode for maybe series 4, and we'll talk about, you know, this, because I really want to talk more today about the single life side of it, you know, how we can get into relationships, how we can move through that. And I think that would be actually that would be an awesome episode, I think, anyway. So we'll definitely do that. So we get to this
Yeah,
we get
definitely.
to this point of the show, which is your opportunity to, like, your final insights. So insights that you could share with anybody listening right now who are struggling a little bit with things. You know, just a few little takeaways. You know, to make them feel whatever we want them to feel.
Yeah, I think that the one thing that I want people to realize is that they're a system. And so a lot of things, when they feel that they're broken, it's not that they as a soul are broken. It's that something in the system is not working between mind, body, and spirit, if that makes sense. So you're working perfectly based on what you believe to be true. So that means there's something in your belief system or something in your experience that has created a short circuit if you see something playing out in your life that's not the way you want it to work out. So if there is something that's not working, take a look at your beliefs around that thing. And that's all it is. So it's not about you as a soul. It's not about the other person as a soul. It's about the way you work. And that will have something to do with your belief system or something that you've experienced in your life. You're doing the best you can based on what you've got, and your system is showing that. So try and forgive yourself. Just be interested and observe and be curious rather than being scathing or damning. You're doing the best you can. And the other thing, which is my favorite NLP presupposition, is there's no failure, only feedback. So you have not failed. The thing you've done is not a failure. It's what's the feedback around this? What can you learn from that so that if you want to experience it again, it can be experienced in a way that you find more fulfilling? Or if the feedback is never do that again, that wasn't for me, then that's only feedback. It doesn't mean you failed.
Wow, thanks so much. That's absolutely amazing. And it takes me back to my NLP days now, when I had lots of that. I did it for a few years with my friend Nikki in Bristol, and I absolutely loved it. I found it so fascinating. I was just fascinated by the whole thing as much as having it as a treatment style too. And all the therapies I've had over the years have played a part in my healing journey, which I love. You know, I can't tell you which particular one had the biggest shift. It doesn't matter. All those co-regulation relationships, therapeutic relationships, all got me here today. And look, I just, you know, I didn't know anything about any of this stuff when I was depressed and anxious. Whereas now I just love learning about it. I can't get enough of it now. So that's the main thing. So like I said, with 100%, let's get you back on for, well, halfway through series 2, I've got guests for the rest of the series, but for series 3, in a couple of weeks, we'll meet up and we'll do the sort of single person perspective episode 2. I think that'd be absolutely amazing.
I would love that. That would be such fun. Thank you so much for this, Owen. I really appreciate it. It's been great. I've had such a good time.
Yeah, it's been great stuff. Don't go anywhere. I'm just going to quickly thank my patrons, and then we're going to just find out what's next for you. You know what the future looks like. So I hope this has been helpful to everybody listening. That brings this episode to a close. I want to thank all our patrons for their support on Patreon. Honestly, you guys, it's amazing. I am going into full-time work as teaching assistant, but honestly, your contributions allow me more time to do this, and I can't thank you enough. Honestly. So thank you, Mike Morgan, Emerald McLeod, Maggie Palmer, Roland Chesters, Hannah Irvin, Karen Goodson, Julie Ferris, and of course, Stephen Truelove and Darren Osborne, who are my co-hosts on our other Wellbeing show. What an absolutely awesome bunch of dudes they are. Really, really cool. So you can sign up to the Man Cove Wellbeing community at the link in the description of this video, or visit www.patreon.com/MCW. There's some benefits on there too. And we have just announced the Coaching Cove, which you can hear more about in future episodes. So it will be a live stream space for men and women to come in, and we'll answer your questions. We'll have a great time and create a really gorgeous space for everybody that loves what we're doing. So check out for that. So Dawn, what is the plan for the future? What does life look like for you?
Oh, well, I have to say more of the same, actually. So working with my clients, which is fabulous. I've also, just before lockdown, started a salon night. So it's a bit like a girls' night in, boys' night in night, talking about basically sex, love. So it's sex and love and Prosecco, bit of that, and helping people with their relationships in a kind of safe but sumptuous environment. So I'm hoping to do more of them and do some for men. So I'll be interested to see if men would be willing to just sit, have a drink and talk, as a group. I know girls find it really easy, women find it really easy. Be interesting to do that. So I'm looking forward to holding more of those. I've also got a book up on my it's on my wall. So I need to start really writing that as well. But the plan's all there. So yeah, fun. Just reaching out and having and talking more, and that energy exchange for people to know that they're not alone, and and that actually knowing themselves can be fun and not hard work.
Yeah, certainly can. When you take away all that judgment and you just start to look in and go, oh, okay. You can't just suddenly go, oh, self-love, compassion, I love myself. That's not how it works. But if you can start to observe stuff, you can spot the triggers, but you can also spot all the glimmers, all the bits that set your soul on fire, and those little special moments of people that you're around. It's beautiful. So what is the best social media platform for you? What is it? Facebook, Instagram? Where are you most active?
It's both, actually. I'm probably both. Facebook is a good one. So it's Dawn Thomson, Let the Good Stuff In. And Instagram is Dawn S. Thomson. So yeah, love to hear from people there. And my website is literally www.dawnthomson.com. So there's a couple of things on there, explains a bit more about what I do. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Fantastic. Yeah, I love the idea of the salon stuff, so people check that out. And I also want to just show you some love for that awesome TEDx talk you did with the life being a script. I absolutely loved it.
Oh, thanks.
So I encourage people to check that out, because I absolutely love my films. I love writing, poetry and script stuff. So it tapped right into my metaphors.
Yes.
Really love that. So people check that out. If I remember, I'll put a link in the description of this video for that talk, because it is brilliant. And that's what sold me. I watched that. It's like, right, she's coming on.
Oh, hooray! And I'm coming back, whether you like it or not. I'm just going to storm it. I'm going to find a way of hacking in and go, get me on to talk about single people. That would be fab. Oh
yeah, well, I'll talk about anything. But like I say, this Coaching Cove idea we've got coming up is a very new concept. But I think you could be a really great addition to our live streams too, with Q&A. So
would love that.
We'll get you on for that.
Thanks.
So awesome. I'll put all the links in the description. I just want to thank you again for coming on. Thank you so much. It's been absolutely delightful. Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for listening, everybody. We'll be back next time for more wellness chitty chat. I can't explain to you guys how amazing the next set of guests are going to be. Honestly, human beings are just wonderful. So have a wonderful day, everybody. Stay safe. I was saying stay home, but depending on where you are, we don't have to do that so much now. So that's nice. And support your friends online. But please, there's some helplines in the description of this video. So if you do need any help, you find anything today triggering, please check out those helplines. They're there to support you, and they're all really awesome. So check it out. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time.